I'm here with HoopsHype's Michael Scotto. Michael, thank you for taking the time. Just wanted to get your general thoughts on the Suns offseason. Let's start with Josh Okogie. Obviously, bringing him back, $8 million a year was probably more than some people were expecting, but does it make sense for a team in that position to kind of sign him to that type of deal?
Well, I think you got to look at it big picture. It's not just for a Suns fan, is he worth $8 million at face value? The bigger picture is, given their roster construction and the salary cap rules that they have to follow, getting a guy like him on an $8 million deal gives them somewhat flexibility to potentially trade him and use him as an asset in that regard. The second year of the deal is non-guaranteed. So essentially, you're working with an expiring contract. And so that was the value there, and it's maybe a little higher and inflated than some would have thought. But a similar thing happened with Philadelphia with KJ Martin. So for Phoenix, they get a guy that they can have as a rotation guy that they've had before for a couple of years. But bigger picture, Josh Okogie becomes an expiring contract and a trade asset essentially for the Phoenix Suns looking ahead as they're trying to tinker the roster and make an eventual, what they hope to be a championship run.
To your point about that, they brought back several of their own free agents, Bol Bol, Damian Lee for a lesser cap hit there, Royce O'Neal with that bigger deal. Kind of, what is your read on, the efficiency of those moves?
Well, I think certainly for Phoenix, getting back Bol Bol, I've always liked Bol Bol. I think he's a really good talent. It's just about harnessing it. Damian Lee, a really good shooter. And when you can get a guy that can shoot around 40% on a minimum deal, that's a win. But I think you touched on also Royce O'Neal. Royce is a guy, and I had him in Brooklyn with the Nets. So Royce is a guy that can fill multiple roles as a wing guy. He can play a little bit of small ball forward if you need him. And a guy that is a really good locker room guy. For the value they got, to have him under a mid-level exception territory, I thought it was a fair deal. I think maybe someone that if it would be 3 years instead of 4. But, that's the only thing that maybe was a little bit of a surprise. But Royce O'Neal and Kevin Durant in particular, good friends, and certainly that chemistry is going to be needed as Phoenix tries to take that next step this year for sure.
Yeah, obviously they're bringing back most of the core. They were able to go out and add 2 players in Monte Morris and Mason Plumlee. Yeah. How do you feel about those moves, especially considering, all they had were basically vet minimums to work with?
Yeah, I thought the Monte Morris deal was a little interesting because Phoenix had been aggressively pursuing Kyle Lowry. You as well touched on it in your reporting as well. And I thought Kyle would have been an interesting fit for them. But once Philadelphia, made their moves and got Paul George, for him to stay close to home and have maybe a little bit of a clearer path to championship contention in the East, that played in Kyle Lowry's return to Philly there. But, Mason Plumlee, a guy that, another former net that I had previously in my turf, but a guy that low maintenance, can fill up a box score in a variety of ways, moving the ball, maybe sometimes on a hockey assist, but a good value for him. And he also, some ties from Brooklyn that I think could have played into that. Matt Tellem, the new assistant GM for the Phoenix Suns, he was in Brooklyn when Mason was a youngster there before he eventually got moved to Portland. So I think that some of those relationships had something to do with it. And quite frankly, the opportunity to play. I think he is going to have a role off the bench for this team and get consistent minutes. So if you're a Suns fan, look out for that.
Last one I had for you. Obviously, this summer, the big talk has been about the tax apron, the new CBA. You're seeing some teams like the Nuggets and Clippers do what they can to duck under that second tax apron, and then you got Phoenix on the complete opposite end, just diving head first. What's your read on how this new second tax apron is affecting teams? And if you're a Suns fan, should you feel good about your owner being willing to go that far?
So I'll answer that in 2 parts. To the latter part of your question, I think if you're a Suns fan and you've got Matt Ishbia just lighting, it's like in The Wolf of Wall Street when Leonardo DiCaprio's on the boat and he's just like throwing it away into the ocean. I mean, but that's what you want. If you're a fan of a team, you want an owner that's willing to spend whatever it takes. In Matt Ishbia's opinion, he thinks that this can be a championship team, and he's going all in and spending. So you've got to commend him for that. I think to your first part of your question, across the league, the second apron, I would say, essentially is like a hard cap for a lot of teams around the league. because one, with the flexibility roster-wise and the construction of that, but I also think for some owners, they don't want to, in smaller markets, they don't want to go that far. And I think for Phoenix, that's been one of the advantages of having Matt Ishbia. And I mean, look, Matt's done his own press conferences we've seen. Not a lot of owners do that. I think he's a bold guy, and I think, he's trying to go all in as best he can to build a good team. They're going to need health. Certainly with Bradley Beal, it's always been the X factor for him. KD played a lot of games last year. Certainly, that warm weather seemed to help him. And I just think that, like I said, for other teams, that's been almost a hard cap. But to your question, Matt Ishbia just hasn't cared about it. And for Suns fans, again, from where they were previously, I think they want that. If you're going to have a guy that spends that much money, it's hard to really question how he spends it, because a lot of teams and a lot of owners in the league, they don't even get that far.